Koutou katoa. Welcome to Business is Boring. Today's guest is one of New Zealand's great fashion names and successes, Kate Sylvester, who this year marks 30 years in fashion, design and constant creativity. Kate is sold to Barney's and Bergdorf Goodman, enjoys great success in Australia and has been part of making New Zealand's name as a design country. Kate is a key part of Mindful Fashion, a collective of industry people who help to set and support ethical practices in production and business. Her collections and shows are always intelligent, thoughtful and fun, and Kate has been a great friend and support to many in fashion, including me over the years. Kate joins us now to talk the journey, storytelling, and what's next. Tanakwe, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, so let's go back to the beginning. What started your interest in fashion and design? Did you come from kind of a designy family?
Totally. I've basically made clothes my whole life, literally. I can't remember a time when I wasn't, right from paper dolls and dolls' clothes. And I was very encouraged by my mother. Had a beautiful garden, so she wasn't officially a designer, but she was an incredible landscape designer with amazing aesthetics. And so I grew up in just this incredibly beautiful environment that definitely was hugely influential on me.
What was, now that all of the work has been done by kind of pioneering names in fashion and design, it seems a very obvious kind of choice in life. But what were the options, around a career in creativity and following design when you got into it?
Back a million years ago when I was at high school, in my high school, I had to beg to be allowed to do the sewing class because basically I think that was the idea of the sewing class was it was just for the girls who couldn't cope with anything else. And the teacher was this just amazing woman who was literally like a social worker helping everybody else. Once the principal of my school had agreed that I could drop biology and take sewing, I was just in heaven and I was just sewing away like crazy while, I think her name was Miss Alex, was giving kind of period advice and stuff to all the other girls. It was kind of crazy. There was no concept of design at all. I went to the careers evening at school and was basically, I said, I want to make clothes. And so she took, all they knew about was being a machinist. And I said, no, I want to design clothes. And I was told, no one does that in this country. So, but of course back then there were a couple of, there were courses at the Polytechs. And so I did enroll, I studied it was sort of design. It was very technical focused, but we did do a bit of design at Wellington Polytech. So it was certainly not, it was something that people thought was kind of ridiculous, but I was just determined. I was like, that's it. I make clothes. That's who I am.
What influences, or what was the impact of your time in the UK and in Paris, especially, on being part of a scene? Leaving a country where the options weren't there.
So limited. Yeah. My time in London and particularly Paris really, really shaped me as a designer, but also as a crafts person because the first job, my breakthrough into the industry in London was because I'd been to Polytech, not a design school, I could sew. And so I managed to fake I sort of pretended that I could be a sample machinist and sort of did this crazy crash course in learning how to make beautiful couture clothes at a designer who's gone down the tubes now, but Arabella Pollen, she was very sort of Sloaney, made absolutely very Sloaney, but incredibly beautifully made clothes for the likes of Princess Diana was one, bought clothes from her. So there I really learnt the craft. I just learned so much. It was amazing. And then in Paris, I got a job with another designer who's gone down the tubes now. But at the time, it was grunge time, and Corinne Cobson was doing just these kind of real wild rock and roll collections where she was buying a lot of vintage and over-dyeing it and reconstructing it and kind of, and it was just this crazy, fun, creative place to work. And it was incredibly creatively stimulating. But I think also just to be out in the world was incredibly valuable for me. I was just exposed to so much sort of aesthetically as well. But because I was travelling with my partner Wayne, and it was interesting because I think both London and Paris, certainly back then, felt very hierarchical, very snobby. We wanted to start our own business, and we knew we would really, really struggle in that environment to try and set up from nothing, because and so the kind of our approach to business felt much more doable back in New Zealand. So we came back here and opened a store.
You mentioned being, the machinist and being a maker, which is something I've seen you talk about before, like the importance of being a maker. And like maybe talk us through what a sample machinist does, because if you don't know, like, that's such a key kind of person for making the ideas of a designer true in cloth, right?
Yes, well, yeah. So basically, as a designer now in my team, I'll do the initial sketches, talk them through. Pattern maker makes the actual, the paper pattern for the garment to be cut from. And then the machinist is the person who puts together the first, so it starts with a toile. We'll make a little, a toile and any old fabric just to create the shape of the garment. Then we'll go into the real fabric. And the sample machinist is absolutely crucial for just the technical thing of working out how to put, because every fabric's different. You're trying to create new, different shapes, and it's there's this huge, particularly the pattern maker and sample machinist work incredibly closely together. It'll be, there's too much gathering in this sleeve head, or there's not enough gathering in this sleeve head. I need binding through this waistband, the fabric's stretching, the fabric's slipping. It's a huge, they have a huge input into making sure that what we end up with is a functioning, practical garment that serves its purpose. So, and it's an incredible craft, which I love. Just the tactile thing, fabric, just working with fabric, particularly, I particularly love wool, because you can mould it, and as a machinist, working with wool is so divine. It just moulds and it's beautiful and steam. In London, the very experienced sample machinist who basically taught me how to sew properly, he also taught me how to steam, and that was a revelation what you can do with an iron and steam. Again, it's craft. So that has never left me, and really has big input into the way I design, because I am thinking through the construction the whole time.
Yeah, and when you are a sample machinist at a designer pushing the edges of things, like you're very much kind of doing, art, science, the technical side, the physics of clothes.
Absolutely,
it's phenomenal,
yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And once upon a time, like most, a lot of people would have known what went into sewing. But these days, very few people, I think, appreciate just how complicated and just how, human and physical it is to make and creative it is to make these things.
Yeah. What I find reassuring, though, is I feel like that concept, because back growing up, everyone sewed at home. Then it died off completely. But I feel like certainly my nieces, my children, there's a real return to sitting at a machine and actually sewing your own clothes, which I think is fantastic. But the return to craft has been amazing and really valuable.
When you did come back, you mentioned you came back and opened a store. Tell us about that, as that was it Sister on or near High Street?
On Kitchener Street, across from Albert Park. And we had, we literally did it with no money, found this beautiful, it wasn't a proper retail store. It was just a big empty space in an old, I'm not sure what the building would have been, but it was huge, just a huge space, huge high stud, beautiful old building. And we petitioned off the front of to create the store, and then in the back we had the workroom, and we actually lived there as well. So Wayne did all the actual. We're literally both at heart. It's all about the craft. Wayne literally built. He built the walls. He built the shower. He built the fold down bed we slept in. He built the tables that the pattern making table I worked on, and he designed the store, made the tables, made the racks, made everything in the store. And then I was out the back and literally sewed. When we opened the doors, I'd sewed every single garment that was hanging on the racks. And so it was, and that was what I loved about it, was that we could just start from nothing. And it was just the two of us, and we literally worked, I don't know, we were probably working about 28 hours a day and having 4 hours sleep. I was the shop girl as well, so I was our first retail staff member, which was very interesting. It's very good to get really close to your customers. You learn a lot from working out the front as well. But so we just started literally from scratch, from nothing.
And then you built up Sister to be, a real kind of like favourite in Auckland. But you had to change the name. What happened there?
Yes, so we'd been going a couple of years, and we miraculously, fantastically got a first order for a store in Australia. So that was incredibly exciting. Made all the product, sent it over there, and then it had been hanging probably in the store for a couple of weeks, and we got a, cease and desist letter from a big multinational saying, because Sister, generic name, and we'd actually trademarked it in New Zealand, but we hadn't thought to trademark it in Australia. And basically they told us we couldn't trade as Sister in Australia. We had to remove all our product, and I think they were seeking, damages for us copying their name or whatever, which, of course we hadn't intentionally done that. But the saving grace, it was brutal and awful and horrible, but thank God we had, because we're trademarked Sister in New Zealand, we were actually able to negotiate. So they ended up paying us money for the trademark in New Zealand. So, but it was devastating. I mean, you start your first brand. I just adored that. It was like my child being told you had to take the name, change the name of your child. But then we decided, well, okay, the safest option basically is to use my own name. So we did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You mentioned the, order into Australia there as well. Like, tell us about the importance of Australia for brands in New Zealand. because New Zealand's so small.
So small.
The ability
Yeah.
to get the scale and the
Yes.
kind of work that goes into making a collection and sampling and doing your lookbook and the promotion and all the work for that. You really need to be in a much bigger kind of market to ever get to that scale. And Australia was for many years a really the goal for New Zealand designers,
Yes,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Like, how was it kind of building up into that market, and how did that go for you?
It was incredibly tough at the beginning. When we started going over there, they thought there was very, very, very little product from New Zealand was sold across there, and they were just very, very patronising and thought the whole idea of designer product coming out of New Zealand, this bunch of sheep farmers, was ludicrous. And I did a lot of really humiliating showings with people not turning up, with people being incredibly dismissive. There was my worst showing ever. I got halfway through and I said, "There's no point in me continuing, is there?" And the store owner said, "No." And that was
awful.
that. And yeah, it was. But the real turning point, I just think we can never undervalue how incredibly important it was for New Zealand design to be able to participate in Australian Fashion Week because that started about the same time that we started moving into Australia. And back then, trade and enterprise were incredibly supportive, and basically they encouraged and financially supported a bunch of designers to go and participate in Australian Fashion Week. And we really, I think we really shocked Australia with how creative, with how sophisticated we were. It was through those early years of doing that they had buyers from Barney's and Bergdorf coming down. And when we picked up orders from those stores, then everything changed for us, how we were seen in Australia. And so we were really able to build our business there. And it certainly, it just transformed our scales of instead of having to just buy existing fabric, we were able to start developing fabrics ourselves, doing our own colourways, doing our own prints. It really transformed, the scale of the business. So that was, those initial years of Australian Fashion Week were incredible.
Yeah, that's so cool. Something that Dion Nash once said on this podcast, I think, years ago, that's always stuck with me. He said that, if you're a Kiwi and you want to, make it in Australia, he said, go to LA and sell some stuff in LA, because then Australia will go, "Oh, you sold in LA.
Yeah.
Oh, you're cool." And,
Yes.
if you say you're from New Zealand, they'll, like you say, be really patronising. And,
The country cousins.
It's not much harder to kind of get in and sell to someone in LA than it is to get in and sell to someone in Sydney.
Yeah.
And that kind of Australia as well had the department store model, which was, really big in their retail scene, right? Where, that helped to break brands and establish them in the culture. And you've been a really key part of department store offerings for years and years there.
Yeah.
How's that going? And it's so different to New Zealand, hey, because it's just not that key here.
It's just, so we sell to David Jones and, have done for a very long time. And, the thing is that, what the department stores, they're incredibly challenging. It's for a new brand going into the department store model, boy, it's an enormous learning curve, because they have incredibly tight deadlines and rules, and it is a real minefield figuring out how to work with department stores. But what it does do, if you can get it right, and if you can get it, because you just cannot work with them unless you've got really, really stable, reliable, production. But what you do get is you get really, orders on quite a different level to if you're selling to independent brands. So you've got to be it really focused our systems, and it really changed. I mean, I guess it just taught us to be a hell of a lot more business-like and efficient. You just can't have product running late.
And like these days, department stores kind of rely on brands to bring people in the door, as opposed to in the past where people would go to the department store. Like the department store kind of was Instagram, right? Before Instagram. That was where you went to see new brands and see interesting people. And you really trusted the salespeople on the store. But that kind of flip, is what I think is like one of the biggest changes in fashion, right?
Yes, I think, what I think the basically since social media has come along, it really, really did, and the internet, online shopping, it really, really shook up our industry and completely changed the way we trade. I mean, certainly, when I look at it, we used to do far more wholesale and way bigger orders into the department stores. That's pulled back now, but at the same time, our online is just completely transformed. And for a while, there was a real fear that it was, the internet was going to destroy bricks and mortar retail, including the department stores. But I feel like it's levelled out now, and there is enough people appreciate the balance between the convenience of buying at home, online, but then and certainly, we've had to really work at the service we offer in stores of all retailers, but there's a recognition that social thing of going out and shopping, people do love that as well. So I feel like we've sort of plateaued it. It's not gonna, we're not gonna see the end of bricks and mortar, thank goodness, because I love that for myself, that thing of, personally going and trying on the pieces, spending the time in store, building a rapport with the retail, staff. It's a really lovely thing that people is really valuable for people.
And we'll be back in a moment to talk about mindful fashion, creativity, and what's next. Hoki mai anō, and we're back with Kate Sylvester. Hey, so tell me, what does the business look like today? What kind of operations do you have going on?
So basically, we've got our own retail stores in New Zealand, and as I mentioned, online is incredibly important to us, and we have David Jones and the wholesale business in Australia, and that's sort of where we're at now. It's been interesting the last few years of really, COVID absolutely blew the world apart, not just our industry, but everything. And so I think what's an interesting example of how things had changed was prior to COVID, we were doing some really good business through Harvey Nichols in London, and that was all very exciting. And then COVID came along, and of course that blew that out of the water. And since we've come out the other end of COVID and are kind of looking at how we want to, what we want to do with the business, what we've actually been really focusing on most recently is we've realised that we do okay with our online in Australia, but oh my God, we could do so much better. And so we've focused on that as our real growth area at the moment, just because basically started a few years ago when we did come out of COVID, and it was like, okay, what are we going to do? And I just kept saying, look, we've just been through a real tough time. I don't want to go do anything too crazy at the moment. Low-hanging fruit. And it was like, oh, we've got this huge big market right at our doorstep, and we just need to. So our focus really is on growing that online presence in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, because operationally, like fashion's already hard enough, right? With like seasonal models and production and all of that, and the constant need for creativity and new ideas.
Yes.
But then to be doing that on two hemispheres seasons
That's
simultaneously, that's brutal.
And if you've got the energy and the passion for it, and I mean, certainly, you know, when we were really kind of doing it back early 2000s, and we were young and it was so fantastic. Any excuse to get on a plane and go to New York. But I'm a little bit sort of, you know, wearier now. And that was where that thing, it was like, if we've got growth that we can tap into, if we've got room to move in the Southern Hemisphere, then I want to absolutely know we're doing everything we can that we've done, you know, before we, you know, haul ass, because it is, you basically, the seasonal thing is insane. If you're selling summer product in New Zealand, then you need to be selling winter product in New York. And so one hemisphere or the other is going to be 6 months behind. And so, yeah, it's really tricky. So,
it's just so hard. And fashion's one of those places where, you know, when you are the creative leader and the business leader, and you've got, you know, all of the problems of thousands of garments and different production and all of that stuff to consider, but also that real, you know, creative leader responsibility of a dynamic idea every season or, you know, something, a really great organising principle. How do you and how have you come to balance that in business?
Luckily, I think, because as I've mentioned, you know, I work with my partner, Wayne Conway, and he does creatively, he does all the marketing, he does the store fit outs, we work very closely together. And then Wayne drives the business side of things as well, so the financial side of the business. And I am really work very closely with all our production teams as well. So we do very much, we're always juggling the creative roles and the kind of the technical and the business side of stuff. And I think I put it down, we obviously got something right to be here after 30 years. And I think we've always been able to find that balance between being able to not take our eye off the business, and when we're being creative, and then also not getting so caught up in the business that we've neglected the creative side of it. And I can't really pinpoint how we manage to do that balance, but it's an absolutely essential aspect of the business. You can't just be one or the other. I think as a business owner, you've got to find that balance.
And like the coolest thing about, you know, a business like fashion is that chance for storytelling, right? And creating feelings and experiences, whether it's like when someone tries something on or at a store or at a show. And like, tell us about the role that plays in your business. And you know, the role it plays in creativity and excitement in life, right?
That's the thing. I think it works in two ways, because certainly the customers love the storytelling around the clothes. So when we talk about storytelling, what I'm referring to is that we create the collections we create always have a story around them. So I'll take a theme like we did a collection based on the movie Blade Runner. We've done a collection based on the royal family and all the different characters in that. I've literally taken books, like the books of Donna Tartt's, and designed the clothes for all the characters. I took the character of Mia Wallace and decided I was, you know, going to expand. I took the clothes she wore in the film and then created a whole wardrobe for her. There's always a story around the collections. The customers love that. But what I've also found, it's absolutely essential for me creatively as well. And so because I have to keep pumping out new ideas. I mean, it's not even, for us it's a 6 months because we do 4 collections, but the 2 minor collections come off the back of, so we have these 2 themes each year that I build my creativity around. And that's the thing, that the absolutely essential thing for me when I've just come off the back of a collection. I'm completely, mentally exhausted, and it's like that idea of, oh my God, how do I start again? But the way I do is basically I've got mountains, all the things that interest me, be it, I've done hiking collections, gardening collections, anything that's interesting me at the time, all the books I've read, the music I listen to. I basically just mentally start rifling through until there's a little spark that makes me go, oh, here we go, I'm going to tell this story, and then I can roll again. So it's something that's the structure of my creativity.
And it has to be really interesting, right? Because in many businesses, you choose to do your big story when everyone else wasn't doing their same. But things like Fashion Week, things like collections all launching at the same time, means everyone's shouting at the same time.
Yes.
And to be able to stand out and create an experience that's kind of more meaningful and more interesting. And you mentioned the music. I think the role of music and the shows you've had where you've had people like Jonathan Bree in the middle of things, and
yes, that was so beautiful.
It's playing and the kind of storytelling and the kind of theatre of those shows is such a lovely kind of connection for people, right?
Yes, that's something that Wayne, putting on the shows, is such an incredibly collaborative thing with Wayne and I, and that we absolutely love, because you've got your story, you've got your clothes, and then you've got to create, with the runway or the environment where you're putting the show on. That's about building the set, sort of like creating a movie or something. You build the set as the runway, and then you create the soundtrack that creates the entire mood and the emotion for the show. And as we're both total music lovers, and so that's something that we really love doing, is creating that really emotive music for the show, building a whole big picture. And then, of course, when you're casting, you're literally casting the characters who are going to be and so it's just like making little mini movies, I think.
It's so cool. And everyone who's been to a show will have their favourites, but venues like the Auckland Art Gallery, they're just really special ways to experience spaces that you might not be in. That movie idea is so cool. What we've talked a lot about kind of a lot of the interesting things in fashion, but there's a lot of challenges with it as a business model, right? And I've been really interested in the work that you've been doing with mindful fashion to help to kind of right size some of the approaches to sustainability and ethical choices in fashion for a market like New Zealand, where maybe it isn't as easy for designers here to meet a lot of the traceability or a lot of those things that are the right size for some of the bigger fashion kind of conversations. Tell us about your journey into mindful fashion and what you're trying to do there.
Yes, so mindful has been quite an amazing journey, and I think it's been incredibly positive for our industry. I should know. I think we've been going 4-5 years, and we reached 100 members today, I think. So very, very happy about that. So, mindful. It's basically it came about basically sharing just. Emily from the brand Ruby, she's a great friend, and we kept swapping stories about how hard we knew we wanted to be more sustainable and responsible in our business practices. We knew that it was incredibly important for our industry to do that, and we were really struggling with what we could do in our small market miles from anywhere. And it really, Mindful came about just from sharing. We kept kind of going, oh, okay, well, if we could work together on that, it would make things a lot easier. So then we extended out, reached out to other people in the industry and realised there was a real, that there was both, that everybody was feeling the same way as us. I think it's just, the fundamental reality is you can't have a business anymore unless you've got your core responsibility and sustainability pillars in place. I mean, customers demand it, the planet desperately needs it, and any responsible business person, that's fundamental now to business. And so basically we pulled the industry together, created Mindful Fashion, and so now we are working amazingly cooperatively together to solve a lot of the problems. And, in the last few years, there's been a lot of, all around the world, people have been getting their businesses registered as carbon zero, monitoring their carbon credits, their carbon emissions. We as a brand, we were able to become carbon zero, which is really great, but it was a hugely expensive process and took a huge amount of time. And many of our members just didn't have the resources to do that. So we've actually built a program where our members can measure their carbon emissions and come up with, there's a program for how to reduce your carbon emissions. We can't, certify you carbon zero because we don't, that's a step too far, but it's an incredibly positive thing for our members to be able to do. And so we now have that program that we've got 10 brands who've gone through the program, and we're about to roll into the next lot going through that. And it's programs like that we've been working incredibly hard to look at getting, the machinist apprenticeship program up and running for our business, for our industry. That's been unbelievably hard. Government is extremely challenging and glacial, but they've recognised that our industry does need that program, and so we'll be now able to start building that program, which is really exciting progress. So these are all, we've done a lot of work with circularity again, and it's about looking, because some stuff is way harder than others. And again, it's like you've got to look at what we can do, depending on our resources. So for small brands in New Zealand, it's incredibly hard to get all the auditing you need from international makers. That's a big challenge. But one thing that there's other things that we can work on here really easily, things like circularity programs for the longevity of the garments. We did an amazing seminar on just simple things like how to, when you're cutting out, you've got your fabric that you cut your garments out of, and there's a whole lot of waste around, all the scrap fabric that is wasted once you've cut a garment out. And we've done really great seminars on how to absolutely reduce your fabric waste down to, the ultimate is a zero waste garment where you're not wasting any of the scrap fabric. So we are doing, so there's a multitude of programs that we are working with and working collaboratively. That's what's incredibly cool about Mindful, is it's brought our industry that used to be very fractured. We had no body to represent us. We never came together as a collective, and now we have a shared journey and purpose, and it's fantastic. It's been really positive.
Yeah, it's such a cool thing. And that point of connection for the industry, absolutely, and being able to, with a larger voice, work on things like traceability and the like, because
yes.
it's always funny to see, there'll be a, report come out and they'll say, oh, New Zealand fashion label gets an E because they can't tell us where their, fabric traceability story. And you're like, well, actually, that's actually maybe even a good story. Like, not many people realise how much of the industry here works on dead stock. And so, a little end of a run of fabric that has been used overseas and comes here, and because we're smaller and a season behind, it's perfect. And that could be a good story, but you get an F for it. And so, it's like there's more context required for a small industry like New Zealand for some of these things.
Yeah, and so that having that voice has been great for actually educating the consumer as well on, things like dead stock.
And what does the future look like now?
Well, certainly, I think the key things, the real positives, as I've talked about, for our industry, having Mindful, being able to work together is really positive for the future of our industry here. And I feel that initiatives like this, just what we're going through at the moment with doing, just building our e-com presence in Australia, there's a whole kind of new way growing a business, establishing a business and growing a business in the world now is quite different to how it was when we started 30 years ago. And in some ways I look at it and it feels very daunting. But then there's this amazing ability we have now to directly communicate with potential customers and directly grow a customer base. And I think that's the really exciting aspect of our business, of any business, because it again, this weird thing of being in this tiny market at the bottom of the world. This is an amazing opportunity. Just being able to talk direct is amazing. So that's where I think we'll see really interesting development in the next few years.
Yeah, so exciting. And what advice would you have for people who are looking to, I don't want to make it sound like 30 years ago is so long ago, but culture moves so fast, right? And because of the success of people like you, it's now entirely a sensible thing to want to be a designer and to want to sell your clothes overseas and to, be an ideas-led business. But it wasn't that obvious, when you began. Like, what would your advice be for people who do have a vocation and do have a dream and want to make it happen?
I think that the real core strength that we have as a business, why we have been able to sustain our business for 30 years, so the core of our business is our core customer base. And I think that the most important thing, it doesn't matter whether you were starting 30 years ago, whether you're starting now, a business is only as strong as its core customer. And by that I mean building up a customer base that are loyal, that will come back, that anybody can have a fickle, transient success, but the only way to really sustain a business is to have this core customer and have that build a real trust and affection with your customer base. And I think that no matter what business you're in, no matter when or where you started, that's what you've got to build on. That's everything for a business.
And as a final thought, what will success be for you personally and for the brand?
Well, I feel like it's not about what will be, because I mean, what I have realised in this year, celebrating the 30 years, has been just incredibly positive and affirming. And I think being here, doing this podcast with you, celebrating 30 years, I'm just incredibly proud of what we've done, of what we've achieved, and the fact that, we we've got an incredibly strong business and that we love, and to be able to be here now and say that's my greatest success.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing part of the story so far. That's Kate Sylvester. Kia ora.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much to Kate for joining us, to you for listening, and for everyone who helps make this podcast happen, like our producer, Samuel Robinson. Do rate and leave a review if you like what we do. E no hora.